You got knocked the fuck out, man!
Hello everybody, I am Insomniac, and today we're going to continue on our hero guide series with Berserker, the next Viking I'm taking a look at. And as you can see right here on screen, he is the assassin Viking. He is supposedly hard to play, has short range, and is also categorized as a harasser. And obviously what all of that means I'm gonna tell you in this video. Here we are in the practice mode against a level 0 bot. And as always in these types of videos, I'm first going to talk about the hero specific moves. And as you can see already, he only has 2 chains. And usually, when I only see 2 chains in a character's move list, I'd say they're not about their chains. But Berserker, well, Berserker is kind of an exception to this rule. You can see he has 2 chains, one of which being heavy, heavy, heavy. Usually this is a pretty dumb chain, as if your opponent is not going to parry the first heavy, they're going to parry the second one, and if they're not going to parry that second heavy, then they're going to parry the third heavy. So this is really not a good chain to go for on its own. And I've seen so many people in like Dominion just spam heavy, heavy, heavy and not even changing sides. That's so goddamn dumb to do. But anyways, and the second chain, as you can see right here, has an infinite symbol, and yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory what that means. And you can see it is either light heavy or heavy light. Now, this doesn't mean that you can either do a light into heavy and a heavy into light. This means that you can chain these attacks for as long as you want, or for as long as you don't get interrupted. So yeah, the 2 chains that Berserker has is heavy, 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 or light heavy or heavy light, and that's actually an infinite. So light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, 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 for example, is something you could do. The important thing that you have to know about the infinite chain right here is that you can chain any light into heavy and any heavy into light, but you can't chain light into light and you can't chain heavy into heavy. You have to mix and match light and heavy attacks so that every second attack is a light or every second attack is a heavy. And there are a few conditions that make you not be able to continue this chain, which I'm gonna talk about in just a little while. But this infinite chain can also chain into the heavy, heavy, heavy ender. Conditions that make you not be able to continue the chain. One thing that will make you stop immediately is if you chain into a top heavy. That's the only attack that you can't continue the chain afterwards. So you can see it doesn't matter what side I attack from, but as soon as I go into a top heavy, that's when the chain ends. What you see a lot of people do is do a light from one side and then the heavy from the other like this, but many people forget that you can do the same sides and get a top light in there, for example. And as you can see, this chain doesn't take a lot of stamina to do for Berserker. Berserker is not really about his chains all too much, even though you're trying to enforce this infinite on your opponent. It's really not all too useful, because all your opponent has to do to get out of the infinite is either block the light input or parry a light or heavy input. It used to be that as soon as Berserker got his uninterruptibility on the light, that a simply blocked light wouldn't interrupt the infinite anymore, but this has now been changed so that it actually interrupts Berserker's infinite chain when you block his light attacks. So that's also something that you have to be aware of. We're gonna continue on with the Boar Rush, which is Berserker's run in heavy attack, which looks something like this. Now, you have to take note that this has extremely good range and also quite good tracking. Now we have 3 dash attacks added onto Berserker's move list. One is a forward dash light, another one is side dash light attacks, and the last of the 3 dash attacks is the forward dash heavy, and those look something like this. Those attacks are not supposed to be used in the neutral. Those are supposed to be used as mix-ups or reactions on otherwise unpunishable moves. For example, if Warlord did a headbutt, as Berserker you wouldn't be able to get a guard break after that, so instead you have to go for a side dash light. The forward dash, light or heavy don't work because Warlord hits you out of them, but the side dash lights are very good punishes for that. It's also important to know that the side dash lights initiate your chains, so you can start off your pressure right after that. Same thing goes for your top dash light, as that also initiates your chains, but the forward dash heavy does not initiate your chains. This is important to know. And even though you can get into attacks afterwards, it is not a chain. More specific information about these dash attacks is that the side dash lights, as you can see, are not armored, but the forward dash light is armored, or uninterruptible for that matter. And the same thing goes for the top dash heavy, as that is also uninterruptible. Then you also have the slashing rush, which is misleading in its name as it says that it is a rush move, but in fact it is quite the opposite of rushing your opponent down. It is a retreating zone attack. So Berserker's regular zone attack looks something like this, and slashing rush looks something like this. It didn't even hit my opponent there, so what is it useful for? Well, basically, this is a retreating attack, which means you don't always have to dash back. You can also zone attack back, which doesn't take as much stamina as doing a regular zone, as you can see. It only has 3 hits. It is basically impossible to get parried because of the fact that you're moving backwards, and you can see it is uninterruptible as well. So yeah, this is more useful in 4v4 modes or 2v2 modes rather than 1v1s. But if you, perfect example being again Peacekeeper, if Peacekeeper was to do her jump heavy, which is that fast jump stab that she has, you could do backwards zone and hit her out of it. As you can see, Berserker doesn't have all too many moves, one of which is not even useful all too often, which is the run-in heavy, as run-in attacks are really not all too useful in 1v1s. He has 2 chains, one of which being an infinite, another one being a triple heavy chain, which is very unusual, and then he has 4 dash attacks. As you probably know if you've played the game a lot, dash attacks are really low risk, high reward moves if you do them in the neutral, but they are more used in specific situations. As I've said before, that the side dash lights, for example, can be used to get some sort of punish after otherwise unpunishable moves. Now, the jump in light being armored gives you some utility that the side dash lights, for example, don't give you, and that is that you can, for example, tank through an attack and then start off your pressure. So this light doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it is armored and allows you to chain into your chains. And even though this is not an exceptionally great trading tool, it is a very good momentum shifting tool, as you are uninterruptible and can initiate your chains after it. The thing is just, this is not a particularly hard parry, and it is a light attack, so your opponent gets big punishes off that. And this, the jump in heavy, for example, would be the better trading tool for Berserker, as this does quite a bit more damage, but it is a lot slower than the light attack and therefore an even easier parry. However, your opponent doesn't get as big of punishes on that. So this is not a move that you do in the neutral, definitely not. This is a move that you do on predicting your opponent doing an attack and then tanking through it. So yeah, those have already been all of his attacks. Now let's go over to his hero specific traits, and I'm kinda getting tired of saying this, but again, Renown and Revenge mode we don't care about, because again, they're not hero specific. So why the hell are they even there? Whatever. Berserker has a few interesting traits. First one that you're going to notice immediately is his defense type, which is again an active stance or a reflex guard stance, which is the same thing as Orochi and Peacekeeper, in that if you want to block, you can only input a direction for a certain amount of time, as indicated by the white indicator turning black. A black indicator means that you're not blocking that way, and a white indicator means that you're blocking that way. This is again something that comes as a little downside to the defense type of an assassin, but to balance that out, assassins obviously have the deflect mechanic. Now I can't show the deflect off against a level 0 bot, so I'll keep that for the level 1 bot. But as you can see, the first line just tells you how to deflect, which is dodging in the direction of an incoming attack just before impact. You deflect by dodging in the direction of an incoming attack just before it would hit you otherwise. So what does Berserker get after his deflect? Well, it's kinda underwhelming, because Berserker's deflect gives Berserker an automatic guard break. This doesn't sound all too bad, but I'm gonna explain why that is not as useful as you might think. But anyways, we're gonna continue on. As we can see already, the next trait is infinite uninterruptible chain, and when you perform a chain of 4 attacks or more, your attacks become uninterruptible, and additional attacks also cost less stamina. This is again true for the infinite chain right here, but the thing is, it says when you perform a chain of 4 attacks or more, your attacks become uninterruptible. Uninterruptibility, as we've said before, is this white glow. So if you look closely, I get uninterruptibility after the second hit, and this was something that the developers have changed in the recent patch, but they have not changed the text in the move list yet again. Like, I'm happy that they're doing these changes, but they also should not forget to change the text in the move list, because if a newcomer comes to the game and reads, oh, after the 4th attack, and he doesn't know what uninterruptibility is, he's trying to spam out 4 attacks, even though he already has uninterruptibility after the second one. It's just a stupid mistake, but yeah, it is there. And that's why I'm making the video before changes like these, so that I can tell you it's not after the 4th attack, it's actually after the second one. So yeah, but I've already talked about that in my recent patch update video. The next trait would be infinite chain finisher, which is the thing that I said before, as that you can do almost any attack to continue your chain, but the one move that will stop the chain is a top heavy. And as it says on screen right here, a top heavy attack always ends the infinite chain, and it also inflicts extra damage. Now, how much extra damage is this, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. The regular top heavy of Berserker does 38 damage, which is respectable damage for a top heavy. Now, how much is this damage increase? Well, with this extra damage, the heavy does 55 damage. 55. The only attack that does more damage in a single hit is Shugoki's charged heavy. So this is the regular damage, that is 38, and this is 55 damage. That is incredible damage for a single hit that does not have to be charged. So this is one of Berserker's strongest tools. But we're gonna talk about this extra damage in a little while. Next up, we have the trait Chain Starter, which says what I've already said before, and that is that dodge attacks can initiate chain starters. Nothing all too special there. Then we have Close Combat, and this means that missing an attack, a chain or head crusher can be cancelled by a zone attack or dodge. So this basically means that no matter what normal attack you do, or if you miss one of the attacks of one of your chains, or even head crusher, which is the jump in heavy, you can cancel that by zone attack or dodge. So if I were to, for example, miss this jump, I can cancel that with a dodge, or I can even cancel that by a zone attack. So that would look something like this, and this also goes for whiffing any attack. Then the last trait on his list, we have cancel attacks as the hero specific trait for Berserker, and this is the bread and butter trait for Berserker, and that is that you can cancel the startup of your basic attacks by a dodge. Now, I remember that I've said in the Nobushi tutorial that basic attacks means light attacks, but that's actually not true. You can cancel any single light or heavy by dodging. So as you can see, if I do a top light, I can dodge it. And the same thing goes for heavy attacks. Now, instead of having to feint your heavy attacks, you can also dodge them. That basically just gives Berserker a second option to feint, but the part that is extremely big about this is that you can dodge your light attacks. This gives Berserker the option to feint or fake his light attacks as well. This is extremely strong, especially because Berserker's light attacks are really fast. They're really hard to parry. For Berserker being able to dodge his light attacks is extremely big, because your opponent has to react immediately to your light attack to even be able to block it, and if they want to parry it, they have to input heavy immediately. But if you can dodge out of the way of that attack, that is huge, and this is what Berserker is all about. Berserker is all about making everything a guess. Your light attacks, whether you're gonna do them or actually cancel them, if you're gonna feint a heavy into light and then dodge that light again. Berserker is really all about mixing your opponent up as much as you can. Your light attacks might not deal a lot of damage, but because of how often you can fake your opponent out, this will really get them thinking. This is also why Berserker is classified to be hard to play, and I can definitely say he is hard to play. Just because of the amount of precise execution you need to pull off his moves. To do something like this, I mean, this was basically me just spamming some random buttons, but my opponent would have had an extremely hard time to figure out what the fuck I was even doing. One of the strongest mix-ups that I've seen is feinting a side heavy, initiating another side light, and then doing the jump in light. I myself am not the best Berserker in the world, and even though I have played him for 3 reps straight, and I have a good understanding of the character now, I can definitely say playing this guy for 3 reps is not enough to master him. Not at all. At least if you're lacking in execution like I am. This would be one of the mix-ups. Now, this doesn't look all too spectacular on your end as Berserker. It's because you do a heavy into light into jump in light. But the thing is, you have to keep in mind what your opponent sees. First, he gets put into the guess, is he gonna pull through with the heavy? Or is he gonna feint it? Is he gonna feint it into guard break or something like that? But besides all of those options, you decide to do a side light attack, which is extremely hard to react to. And then on top of that, your opponent has to guess then, is he gonna commit to the light, or is he going to dash cancel the light into anything else? Which really gets your opponent guessing. And not only can you feint your heavies, you can also dodge them immediately. So Berserker has so many mix-ups out of every single situation. It is absolutely insane. But the insane part about it is that you have to be able to control these inputs. But randomly spamming buttons will get attacks out that you probably didn't want to get out, and your opponent can then punish you for that. But again, being able to enforce a heavy into light mix-ups like this is extremely hard to deal with. So those have been all of his moves that I can demonstrate versus a level 0 bot. But there's actually one more thing that I want to talk about. Guard break gameplay with Berserker. As you can see, his regular guard break has good range, but is actually quite slow. Something very interesting about the guard break of Berserker is that it is the only guard break in the game that does damage upon throw. If you were able to see there, as soon as I hit Peacekeeper with my throw, she actually takes damage, and the damage of the throw is exactly 8 damage. So it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but you do get damage of throwing your opponent, and that makes sense as you're grabbing your opponent with your axes, and then forward you're punching them with the head of your axe. But Berserker actually has really good throw range for an assassin. If you remember with Orochi has a piss poor throw range, and so does Peacekeeper, but Berserker actually has quite decent throw range. And the thing with throwing your opponent into the wall, for example, is that you get your regular top heavy after it. So this does 8 damage, and this is the guaranteed 30-80 deal afterwards, which leaves you with 46 damage. That is the exact same amount as Raider's top heavy. However, no matter how far away you are and no matter what throw you do, Berserker always gets the top heavy after throwing his opponent into the wall, whereas Raider has to perfectly space his throw to get the top heavy. So yeah, that was the first part of confirming damage with Berserker, and the rest of it I have to show on a level 1 bot. First of all, I wasn't able to show off Berserker's Deflect, so let's do just that. You can see that you get an automatic guard break after deflecting your opponent. So yeah, that is his Deflect. Now, the problem that I was talking about earlier is that basically Berserker's Deflect doesn't serve a really good purpose, as you get a guard break after it. Now, if you don't know any better, you might say, well, that's actually great, because that is a guaranteed guard break. That's the same thing I would get after parry anyways. The problem is just, Berserker has a few unusual properties after parrying his opponent. So the deflect becomes absolutely pointless. But there are a few specific situations in which the deflect is better to go for than the parry. The problem is just, as I'm going to demonstrate here, that Berserker gets any attack of his move list after a parry. So I get a top heavy after every single parry that I do. And that was a Raider's heavy attack. And I still get a top heavy. That is absolutely ludicrous. This is something that is completely exclusive to Berserker, as any other character would not get a heavy attack after a regular heavy parry. So the attack that is always guaranteed is a side heavy after every parry, but even the top heavy should be fast enough. Maybe not against Conqueror, as he recovers a little bit faster, but the side heavies on Conqueror should be guaranteed as well. So knowing that, you can understand why deflecting becomes absolutely useless, because you get a guard break after deflecting. The thing is, you don't get a top heavy after a guard break, but you do get a top heavy after almost every single parry. So why would you go for a deflect then? And that is a question that I don't really have a good answer for. In my opinion, this is a design flaw, but again, the deflect serves a few specific purposes. But yeah, deflecting really doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you can throw your opponent into a wall, because that gives you a little more damage, but again, the difference is only 8. So the only place where it would make sense to go for deflect is right next to a wall, as you can throw your opponent into the wall, which does 8 damage, and then get a heavy after that. This is the only non-specific situation in which you should go for a deflect rather than a parry, because you get 8 damage more than a regular top heavy. Now, is this 8 damage really the best incentive to go for the deflect? The actual answer is sadly yes, it is. Yeah, only in specific situations, just like the few ones right there. That's the only situation in which you should go for a deflect. In any other circumstance, you should go for the parry every single time, unless you're playing against Conqueror, then go for the guard break. Also, if you would go for a guard break after a parry, there are a few characters where your guard break doesn't reach. Perfect example being Nobushi. Now, previously I thought, okay, so I don't parry Nobushi, I instead go for the deflect, because that guarantees my guard breaks. But the thing is, even though that is true, direct attacks after parry will always reach. So it doesn't make sense to deflect her as well, because you get a top heavy after every single parry against her. So yeah, deflect in my opinion is not all too useful as Berserker, but it is really stylish. The only thing that you have to take away when playing Berserker is he takes a lot of time to master, he is hard to play, but he is extremely effective once you get him down. Something about the zone attack as well. The zone attack has 4 hits. The first hit does 9 damage, and then the follow-up 3 hits all deal 7 damage, which makes for a total of 30 damage as well. So this is also an exception to the 20 damage zone attack rule that I've made up in the Warlord tutorial, because that guy actually did 25. His actually does 30, and the thing is, they cannot really block the follow-up hits. Under circumstances, your opponent can actually block the follow-up hits and even parry them. So doing the zone attack in the neutral really is not a smart idea. So yeah, let's talk about confirmed damage. Now, as I've said before, Berserker gets a lot of damage after a throw into a top heavy, as that does 46 damage. And then after every single parry that you do, you can get a top heavy. But besides all of this ludicrous damage that no other character can get, the biggest damage you're granted is actually after a out of stamina throw. As you can see, that was a forward throw into side heavy into top heavy, which is his absolute maximum punish. And just to give you a little idea on what the number on that would be, 8, 33, 55. And you can see that Raider is almost dead after that. This is absolutely insane. But the important thing that you have to take away from this is, this only works after a forward throw. Because if you were to throw your opponent to the side, your side heavy doesn't hit, but at least your top heavy does. But again, you're missing out on 33 of your 96 damage. But the same thing goes if you throw your opponent backwards, as this doesn't hit because your opponent can get up earlier than usual. So yeah, if you want this insane max punish, all you have to do is throw your opponent on the ground in a forward direction into side heavy into top heavy, and you just dealt 96 damage. So the thing you have to know is Berserker is an execution heavy character and takes a lot of time to get used to, especially for the fact that you get a top heavy after every single parry except on Conqueror and the little optimization that you can do by deflecting your opponent's attacks. So yeah, that's basically already it for Berserker. He is actually pretty straightforward, but really technical. Berserker is pretty straightforward in what you can do, but he has a very high skill gap in that he takes a lot of execution to be good with, but he is extremely effective. Berserker hits extremely hard in the right situations, just like this one. So yeah, that's basically everything that I can show you with Berserker. So I hope this video was helpful and you learned something from it. If you did, please be so kind and drop it a rating, as it really helps me out. Subscribe for more if you want to see similar videos to this one. But again, thanks so much for watching. Hope I'll see you next time. Take care.